When people hear the name Paul Hogan, the entire world instantly remembers the rugged image of Crocodile Dundee. Mick Dundee, with his leather hat and legendary knife. He was not just an actor, he was an empire, the man who introduced the wild spirit of Australia to the global stage, earning hundreds of millions of dollars and worldwide fame. Yet behind the dazzling lights of Hollywood and the laughter he brought to audiences on screen, Paul Hogan paid a devastating price that few could ever imagine. His journey to the top was also a journey of gradually losing the things that mattered most. A peaceful family life, the loyal companions from his humble beginnings, and eventually his own inner peace. At 86, with his health failing and the shadows of loneliness closing in around him, the once powerful crocodile hunter finally broke his silence with a deeply emotional confession. He admitted who the love of his life truly was, a heartbreaking statement filled with regret as he reflected on the sacrifices and mistakes made along the road to fame. Before the world knew him as Mick Dundee, Paul Hogan was simply a young man with rough, weathered hands earned from dangerous labor high above the ground. Born in 1939 in Parramatta, Sydney, his background was as humble as it could possibly be. He worked as a rigger on the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge, facing danger every day amid fierce ocean winds, and also served as a lifeguard willing to dive headfirst into violent waves to save lives. That rugged toughness would later shape one of cinema's most iconic characters, but in the 1950s it was simply the hard reality of a working-class man trying to survive. And during those difficult yet hopeful years, there was one woman quietly standing behind him, the only true refuge for his soul, Noeline Edwards. They married in 1958 when Paul was only 19 and Noeline had just turned 18. It was a pure young love, a marriage built not on luxury or glamour, but on simple promises exchanged between two people who had nothing but each other. For 30 long years, Noeline stood beside Paul through the hardest turns in life. She helped raise their 5 children in a home filled with laughter, but also constant financial worries. Together they shared every loaf of bread and every small joy as Paul slowly began entering the world of television. Noeline was not just his wife, she was part of his very foundation, the witness to his complete transformation from an unknown bridge worker into a national star. But as Paul's career soared higher, the distance between them quietly grew wider. Noeline had fallen in love with a humble laborer, yet she was forced to learn how to live with an international celebrity constantly surrounded by flashing cameras and public attention. Although they tried desperately to repair the damage, even remarrying just 1 year after their first divorce in 1981, fate seemed determined to deliver a tragic ending. Noeline likely never imagined that the patience and sacrifice she gave for 3 decades would eventually be shaken apart by a storm called Hollywood, leaving her with a pain that would never fully heal. Paul Hogan's life changed forever because of a bold and almost accidental moment. In 1971, hoping to mock the harsh judges of the talent program New Faces, he appeared on television not as a performer, but as a sarcastic commentator, armed with the sharp humor of a real working-class Australian. His natural charisma, quick wit, and unmistakable Australian personality turned him into a sensation overnight. The enormous success of The Paul Hogan Show, 1973 to 1984, brought his name into living rooms across Australia. But behind the laughter he delivered on screen, a silent crack had begun forming inside his marriage. The overwhelming pressure of fame did not merely steal his time, it destroyed the privacy that had once held Paul and Noeline together. As Paul Hogan became a national treasure, he no longer belonged solely to Noeline. Endless trips, glamorous parties, and the constant praise of the public gradually pushed his loyal wife into the shadows of neglect. In 1981, their 23-year marriage collapsed for the first time. Although they remarried just 1 year later for the sake of love and their 5 children, the price of fame had already been set. Their reconciliation was, in truth, a desperate attempt to preserve what remained of the past before the real storm called Hollywood arrived and swept everything away. In 1986, Crocodile Dundee exploded onto the global stage, earning more than $300 million and transforming Paul Hogan into one of the most powerful stars in the world. But behind that cinematic triumph stood a life-changing turning point that tore apart his private life. On set, Paul met Linda Kozlowski, the young and beautiful American actress who played Sue Charlton. Their connection was far more than acting. It was a passionate whirlwind romance, an irresistible magnetic force that completely overwhelmed Paul, even though he was still Noeline's husband and the father of 5 children. The price of that intense romance became one of the most bitter and public divorces in Australian media history. The second separation from Noeline was no longer quiet and private. It became a public war displayed across every newspaper headline. Australians who had adored Paul's image as a devoted family man felt betrayed. They watched Noeline, the woman who had spent her entire youth building the foundation of his success, pushed aside to make room for a glamorous Hollywood actress. Even more painful than the financial disputes was the destruction of human connection itself. After choosing Linda, Paul Hogan made a devastating decision. He completely cut off contact with Noeline. That silence lasted for 17 long years. 17 years. Enough time for a child to grow into adulthood, yet not enough to erase the pain of abandonment felt by his former wife. Paul turned his back on his past, on the woman who had survived poverty beside him in Sydney, in pursuit of a new fantasy of happiness in America. In doing so, he left behind emotional wounds that could never truly heal within his children or the woman who had once sacrificed everything for him. In 1990, Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski officially married in what the media called a wedding of the century in Sydney. For Paul, it symbolized a hopeful new beginning in America, where he believed he could finally build a lasting paradise with the younger woman he loved. But once the flashing cameras of the wedding day disappeared, a far harsher reality slowly began to emerge. In contrast to the immense success of Crocodile Dundee, Paul's career in Hollywood began to decline rapidly. Audiences seemed to only want to see him in the crocodile skin hat, and all attempts to escape the shadow of Mick Dundee were met with indifference. Yet the one who suffered most silently was Linda. Living in the overwhelming shadow of her husband, she gradually felt trapped. From a promising actress, Linda had to abandon her personal ambitions and professional opportunities to step back, becoming Mrs. Hogan, and dedicating all her time to caring for the family and their shared son, Chance. That sacrifice did not bring the peace they had imagined. Differences in worldview, cultural background, and the pressure of Paul's failing career gradually eroded their relationship. Linda once bitterly shared that she felt like a ghost within her own marriage. After 23 years together, their final attempt collapsed. In 2013, Linda filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. The relationship that had once led Paul to sacrifice his family and reputation in Australia eventually faded into nothing, leaving him once again facing emptiness in glamorous Los Angeles. As the twilight of life set in, Paul Hogan was not only confronted with loneliness, but also with the brutal blows of time and fate. The image of a robust crocodile hunter full of vitality and muscular strength now existed only as a distant memory. Instead, the world was shocked to see a frail, pale old man walking unsteadily through the streets of Los Angeles. A degenerative muscular condition had ravaged his body, turning the powerful physique that once symbolized masculinity into weakened layers of skin and bone. Paul painfully admitted that even the smallest movements had become a struggle against constant pain. The once legendary Dundee now felt imprisoned within his own fading body. He had to rely on supportive devices, and the most painful realization was not physical suffering, but the helplessness of no longer being able to perform the simplest tasks with his own hands. It did not end there, as decades-long legal troubles related to taxation, Operation Wickenby, drained both his spirit and finances. At one point in 2010, he was banned from leaving Australia and treated like a criminal in the very homeland he loved. This event left a deep psychological scar, making Paul feel betrayed by the country that once celebrated him as a national hero. Now living in Los Angeles, Paul Hogan is almost surrounded by an unsettling silence. Old friends have gradually drifted away, and his second wife Linda has also moved on to a new life in Morocco with her new husband. Inside his vast but cold mansion, Paul often sits alone, staring into emptiness. He has everything in terms of wealth and fame that a man could dream of, yet in these final years of his life, he has no warm hand to hold. No companion to share memories of Sydney Harbour or his golden days in Hollywood. His solitude in old age resembles a dark tide slowly swallowing the once great legend into indescribable melancholy. The tranquility Paul Hogan once longed for at 86 remains an unreachable luxury. Even as his health deteriorates, he faces another form of pain stemming from his own flesh and blood. In May 2026, the public was once again shocked when police were called to his Venice Beach residence due to issues involving his youngest son, Chance. Witnessing his beloved child become entangled in allegations of violence and emotional instability, Paul could only watch helplessly as the next generation began to unravel. It was a devastating blow to the heart of a father already marked by countless wounds. Amid the surrounding tragedies, a small glimmer of light appeared at the end of 2024 when Paul and Linda reunited publicly for the first time in over a decade during the 4K restoration premiere of Crocodile Dundee. They stood side by side, smiling for the cameras as if transported back in time. But behind those smiles, what truly remained? It was then that Paul made a shocking confession. "Linda is the love of my life." That statement echoed like a deep, regretful sigh. Yet at the same moment, the public was reminded of another painful truth. While he called Linda his greatest love, the world also remembered Noeline Edwards, the woman who stood by him from his earliest struggles, who shared 30 years of hardship before he became a global star. In his late clarity, Paul Hogan admitted that he once had everything: a loyal wife from his humble beginnings, a peak career, and immense wealth. However, by choosing to pursue a passionate yet fleeting love, he had unknowingly lost the most stable foundation of his life. His regret was no longer about failed films, but about the hearts he had broken along the way in pursuit of an illusion of happiness. Today, at 86, Paul Hogan is often seen walking alone along Venice Beach. It is the very place where years ago he and Linda once walked hand in hand, dreaming of a lasting paradise in America. But reality has left only the sound of crashing waves and the solitary figure of an elderly man with trembling steps on the sand. The two women who once meant the world to him have both found their own peace. Noeline lives quietly with memories of her years in Australia, while Linda has begun a new journey in a distant land. Paul Hogan's life is an epic filled with contradictions. He brought laughter to millions, yet could not preserve happiness within his own home. He conquered Hollywood, yet failed to protect the most essential values of manhood: loyalty and compassion for the partner who stood by him in his earliest struggles. His legacy is not only the immortal character of Mick Dundee, but also a cautionary tale about the cost of fame and the consequences of life-changing choices. Looking back, Paul Hogan may have realized that the brightest form of success is not found in awards or box office numbers, but in the warmth of a hand that walked beside you through hardship. The image of an elderly man walking alone on the beach is a quiet ending to a turbulent life, a reminder that beyond all glory and wealth, what ultimately remains is peace of mind, something that is often sacrificed in exchange for fleeting illusions.